Welcome to the March Meteor Club here on St. Patrick's Day. Uh, I've got my coffee. I don't. It's not Irish, but
Ian
actually
is an
not even.
Irish name originally, so
Nice,
we've got
nice.
that going for us.
So our guest this month is Ian Serlin. Is that how you say your last name?
That's exactly right.
You there?
I'm here. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Oh, awesome. Okay, you cut out there for a second. All right, and so you're the CEO of Useful, and you guys do you build Meteor apps for clients, right?
Absolutely, that's exactly what we do.
Awesome. So, I guess I'm gonna take my question first. I put some in here. If you're watching remotely, you can go to crowdcast.io/e/Josh Owens 16. I don't make up these URL structures, and it's weird, but that's where you go. And you can pop in the questions there if you want. And I'll put that on the Google Plus page as well, so people can see that. All right, and yeah, so how did you get started with Meteor? Like, what brought you to Meteor?
Well, what brought me to Meteor was I'm the kind of software developer that really likes things, the end product, basically the business, the users, the customers, the whole system like sort of working, and so it's never been about solving like really hard technical challenges for me or like data analysis or anything like that. It's always about getting stuff out there and seeing what works with users. And so when I came across Meteor because I thought Backbone was lame and Ember was overly convoluted, which side note I came to be looking at because in a past life when I was doing a live many-to-many video chat startup, we were using Flash and Flex, but then the whole Adobe Apple thing like killed Flash basically. So I needed a different way to write awesome web applications that were interactive. And so I was following Meteor for a little while, and then it was the same time Derby. I don't know if you remember Derby at all, but it was the same time that Derby was like basically starting out. But I watched what happened with the Meteor guys over time and met them actually up in Portland at the first real time conference, and that was pretty epic. And ever since then, I've been following the project really closely, and as soon as I could, started building stuff with Meteor because it's basically like the best way to build even just a normal website, honestly, that is going to be super responsive.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And so, maybe another question that I have for you is, when you started a development shop, and I know from my time at Differential, and even like thinking back my time running Gaslight, early on in the days of Rails or early on in the days of Meteor, it's kind of hard to convince people to make that leap. Like, did you find that you had to convince people to use Meteor, or were they coming to you for Meteor work, or how was that working?
Really good question. Okay, so like the heart of the business, how do you get clients doing Meteor development work? For quite a while, I was going to the Meteor dev shops in San Francisco. I'm actually in Taiwan right now, so if the connection gets crappy, that's probably why. But most of the time, I'm in San Francisco, and that's where the dev shops are. And so, just like naturally meeting people in the community and seeing what's going on and contributing and giving talks and stuff like that, you find out about some opportunities. Like I've been doing software development contracting for a really long time, but for the last basically 2 years, it's been 100% Meteor development. So the first couple were opportunities were basically through exposure of being a part of the dev shops, either people that I knew or people that found out about like a presentation that I gave and contacted me. But the funny thing is, even clients at that time, even just maybe like 6 months ago, even clients that had originally come to me asking to do stuff in Meteor, and like I've say like we only do Meteor work, right? Like we we might like write some bash scripts for you or something like that, but it's basically all it's basically all Meteor work is what we do. And if you want like something else, you should hire somebody else. Um, Throughout the project, as they would talk to other people, like other people that were technologists that didn't know about Meteor or weren't familiar with it or whatever it happened to be, we were constantly having these conversations about, is Meteor the right thing? Is Meteor the right thing? And it was confounded by the fact that every minor version update to Meteor from about '05 to 1 broke something significant and
It's
caused
very true, very true.
and that was happening like pretty consistently across client projects. So like
Yeah.
these libraries we'd build to make our lives easier and make stuff go faster, we kept having to like update, and that would cause issues. And so there's always been two major questions. The first one is just, is it a mature enough technology, which now I think it kind of is, even though everyone wants to see like, you know, the really big company that's using it. The other one is still, and I think this is every technology or every project you get this question, like, is it scalable? And I know somewhere MDG has like a load testing tool that they use, and they should totally open source it and let people prove it. But you know, we've written scripts to spin up like a bunch of Phantom.js instances or a bunch of no DDB clients and simulate like thousands of simultaneous connections to prove that what we were doing, you know, will work, and to figure out what parts were causing slowdowns. Sort of
Mm.
along the same lines of what Kadira does, but all command line, no like, you know, nice web GUI interface. So that's nice that Kadira came along and did that. Hopefully at some point they integrate load testing. Otherwise, if you build a load testing tool, I saw one of the questions was like, how can new people contribute, I think, to the community? There's
Uh,
still a whole bunch of wide open areas there.
yeah. I don't I don't see that question, but yeah, no. I mean that's always a good question. I know. I remember being out the first time I went to a dev shop. Adrian Lanning like gave a demo of load testing tool that he had.
Mhm.
I think it was built in Java though.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just run it and like point it at a Meteor app, and basically you can just load test it that way, which is interesting. And you know, I mean, I guess for me, like that's definitely, it's funny you bring up like scalability and that kind of thing, because that always seems to be the number one thing that I hear. Like, you know, is it scalable, or will it handle the traffic, and you know, what does that look like? And I don't know, like I always tell people like, Yagni, you know, like your business is likely gonna fail long before you ever have to scale to the point where you're gonna have trouble with Meteor, in my opinion. You know, because building an audience, building a customer base, like these are the really hard things to do. Making the sales, like if you're a small shop that makes singular big sales, like these are the hard things for your business to do, in my opinion. Especially like as a developer, you know, a lot of us aren't necessarily wired that way. So I don't think scalability is an issue. Like I'm hosting Crater on a $10 slice on DigitalOcean, and I've got, I think, Compose.io database set up, Elastic Oplog database there,
Mhm.
and you know, I'm handling like 150 simultaneous connections at peak during the day without even breaking a sweat. Like the site, I don't know, it's running at like 10% CPU usage, like 8% CPU usage on average, according to Kadira. Like, just is not, this is not a problem in my opinion. Like, I'm spending $28 and I'm able to service 150, 200. You know, I would imagine this thing will go up to like 500 concurrent users before I have to think about maybe adding another $10 slice. Like, This just doesn't seem like a hard problem to solve right now.
You hit the nail on the head. The majority of the time, the problem is not going to be like being able to scale enough to handle the amount of users. It's to get that amount of users. But I can add a little bit more to that. So when oplog tailing came along, basically Meteor became linearly scalable, which means like if you add another server, if you start with one server and you add another server, you basically double the amount of capacity that you have. Also, the biggest thing are publications, obviously, that will kill your server. So be smart with your publications. But like one under the hood, it's Node. So like one 384 megabyte servo on Modulus can actually handle like 1,000 simultaneous connections and send updates to all of them. If you were subscribing to millions of records, then you're going to have a problem. You want to optimize that. But like generally speaking, you're right. Scalability is a solvable problem. But because no one came out and proved it near the beginning, it was always a question like, oh, what if we get on TechCrunch and we have a bunch of people, or what if we get on Hacker News and we get a bunch of people on? Are we going to be able to handle that sort of flood?
Yeah.
And now Modulus also has auto scaling, which is cool. So, so the story is getting better and better and better. Nowadays, we don't really have to deal with those kind of questions anymore. People are actually getting like Meteor's done a better job marketing itself outside the developer community. So people are actually getting excited about using Meteor for the benefits. And a lot of times it has to do with something around the mobile story as well.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, definitely. I think it was one of those things I feel like was kind of snuck in without fanfare right before 1.0 came out. Like, surprise, you can do Cordova. And, everyone's still like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And, now they're like just realizing, holy crap, we can do amazing things with this. So.
Mm-hmm. And so now we're all learning how to make like really a lot better mobile UIs as well.
Yeah, very true. That definitely seems to be the hot space. Everyone's talking about meteoric or other kind of CSS frameworks that work well for building Cordova apps. So, all right. Next question is from Stefan Hohaus. Apparently, he wants me to call him Meteor in Action today.
Hello, Meteor in Action. Thank you for watching.
Indeed. So how do you organize large development teams when more than a single developer works on an app? Do you use packages, split the app into microservices, or just pray for easy code merges? Please let the code merge.
So Git solves a lot of those problems for you, but basically, like, how do we organize our projects? I wouldn't call them microservices if you're like talking about in the way that Arnauta was talking about in his blog. But a lot of times we do split what I'd call a product into maybe like 3 or 4 different Meteor projects. So you might have your www that's serving your customers. You might have an admin site that admins of the business log into, and they can look at the database or have a completely different view on the data. If it's a B2B company, you might have 2 sets of customers. So you might have another app that's serving the second set of customers. So like for Flavor Please, for instance, which is food truck booking, we have the people that want to book the food trucks and the food trucks themselves, and they use a different app. And then there's usually one Meteor application that is handling what I just typically call services. So these are things like background jobs. We use a queued email system, so like emails get put into a collection and then processed by a separate server. They do reminder emails, like all those sorts of like maybe importing data from a third party. All that would be handled in like a services application. And we do that for a couple different reasons. One of them is scalability. So if you needed, you could scale each of those applications independently. But really, what it's about is conciseness of the code, because when each application is only targeted towards one type of user with one type of access control, then everything gets a lot simpler. You don't have /admin and /admin checks all over your application code, or even like in a library sort of underneath or in your collections, you have one admin app, and you either can log in or you can't, and that's it. Same deal with different kinds of users. And then like generally speaking, Git handles all of our merge conflicts pretty easily. And like if someone on our team doesn't know how to use Git, then we walk through that. And then how do we make sure people aren't stepping on each other's toes? If a client doesn't already have a project management tool that they're using, then we use Pivotal Tracker.
Okay.
And I've actually learned that we use Pivotal Tracker in a very specific way that I thought was relatively common. I don't know, I'd be curious, like how do you do it, Josh?
We tend to just throw everything in the icebox, and then we'll line up like a column for like what we're going to be working on in a sprint maybe, or we'll put like a marker somewhere, and then we'll just pull from the icebox in order and just start working on stories.
How do you write the stories? Like, do you write them? Do you have the clients write them?
Oh,
What
I
do you
mean,
write in stories?
oh gosh, you're
This
flipping
is
it on
like
me here. So
the
I would
region.
say, if I can, I'll have the user write the stories, but sometimes there's some pushback on that, and they don't want to write the stories or they're not interested, and so typically, it's been a while since I've used Pivotal.
What do you guys
Typically,
usually use?
oh gosh, right now.
What's your preference, I guess?
Well, personally, I use just Trello. I spend
Nice.
half the time working on Meteor Club stuff, and the other half the time, I'm working on an application, and they use Jira. So,
Oh no.
yeah, they're kind of in that whole suite, which it's not horrible, but they've got a project manager that's interfacing with the client and kind of writing those stories. So,
Gotcha.
not something I'm handling. But yeah, I would say like anytime you can, like I'm a fan of Cucumber, so anytime you can have the client writing the story, I think it makes it easier to get them involved in the development cycle. And when they can open a page and see a bunch of green check marks on the page showing that all these stories they wrote are passing, I think that's like a really good rapport to have. And you can set that up on CI and get a notification when it breaks, and like that, to me, that would be the dream client setup, which I've
Yeah.
only ever had happen like once or twice in my development lifetime.
Yeah, I've yet to get someone to write their own Cucumber test. That's pretty. That would be like the unicorn. That's cool.
Or even just the business side of it, right? The English part, yeah, that would be the goal there.
So we always have I'll like walk a client through, but I always have them go through and write out their pivotal tracker stories, because I want all the stories to be written from like a business value standpoint, and not I add a collection here and make an allow rule there sort of thing. That's like not particularly
Yeah.
useful to us or to the client. So it takes a little bit of like iteration and refinement, because a lot of times they'll start with massive stories, and so then we'll go back and break them down and all that kind of stuff, and eventually they sort of get the hang of it.
Yeah, yeah. The clients hand you the epics, right? They're like, I need a feature that's gonna cover all of this, and like you realize like you get into it and you've got to like chop it up into all the little pieces that are involved.
Mhm.
Yeah. So back to the original question, I've also seen I've been part of a number of teams, and at Differential we were definitely going the package route, trying to build open source packages that we saw a lot. But the other thing that I've seen is, I would say a lot of teams tend to go the package route. Like I've been on three or four different teams in the last 6 months, and definitely everyone seems to be driving, the package kind of route for functionality.
What is the package route?
Basically, like when you're working on a feature, pushing it into a package, and then it's just, I've noticed a lot of people will make local packages, and so, I was working on Meeting Hero, and so they had a bunch of packages in the package folder that started like mh dash, and each little package had some kind of wrapper functionality, or it was like a functionality based package. And so, maybe it was only used on one page, but that package kind of drove that piece of the application. So
Mm,
almost like a microservice, but just
gotcha. Yeah, yeah. I forgot about the package part of the question. Okay.
yeah.
So that's awesome. What we typically do is there for that suite of applications that makes up one product. There will also be a packages directory, and there's usually one core package for the application, which has the common collections for all of the different applications. Maybe mm, like collection hooks that need to be run all the time to like create timestamps or do this or that sort of thing. And I think it's definitely a good idea to even think of your own application that you're building as sort of an API that you're building for yourself so that you have a separation sort of between the functionality and the user interface code or like the UI code. So the difference between putting like a meteor method call or putting like a database update in an event handler in a template versus having that event handler call into some library to actually do like the business action. And that library could be, your private library that's just called the name of your application dot do my business value, or however you want it to be. But that separation is good, and that's not something that we've done for very long. We just started pulling that stuff more and more, like down, abstracting to one more level because UI changes so much. Like it just makes a lot of, and it like clarifies your thinking when you try to build yourself your own API sort of to use. Now you can always go down a rabbit hole with that, but yeah. But one of the guys on our team, Joshua Ullman, actually, same initials. He just, a, a lot of the time when he comes across like something that he thinks should be reusable, he'll just create a package and publish it to Atmosphere. So if you go to Atmosphere and search for CWOHLMAN, you'll probably see like, I don't know, there's probably 20 packages in there by now. Then they all do like little tiny things.
Yeah.
And that's something I think is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. Like that was a lot of my strategy when I was at Differential. Like we had, excuse me, we had like 10 packages, and 6 of those were mine. So I definitely like even tiny stuff like handling like time ago in words, right? Like it wasn't much, but it just had one little helper and used moment. Actually, I don't even think I was using moment at the time. I used something else, but it just basically would take a timestamp and give you back a time ago in words.
Yeah, packages used to be more crazy because it was like such a pain in the ass to use something from npm and Meteor for the longest time. So there were literally duplicate package wrappers. They're like 20 packages that wrap the same npm library for like a long, long time.
Yeah.
Um, it's gotten a little bit more interesting since then.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a new question. This is from Joris. When do you decide to fork and maintain an outdated Meteor package versus waiting for it to be updated? Have you guys run into this at all?
Oh, we used to do this a lot,
Like maintaining
and
it?
Basically, but privately. So we
Hmm.
would grab a package that might be close to what we want, and then make it our own private package for that project. Because maybe it did, 70% of what we needed or something, or maybe it existed but it hadn't been. There's actually a package out there right now called Mylar, which encrypts things in your database and then decrypts them on the client side, so it's like secure all the way through, which might be good for certain classes of applications, but they haven't updated it in like 6 months. And man, if I had the time, that's something that I think would be awesome to like bring up to speed.
Hmm.
So, but the question was like, how do you decide when?
When to fork and maintain, or push or wait on. I don't know. Like my response to this question would be, I don't know that I'd wait, and I don't know that I have to wait anymore. I think there's enough, like the packaging ecosystem has gotten big enough where you have choices for a lot of the functionality that you want to do, and so you can easily go find like a maintained version of a package, so I don't know if this is a huge problem. I would say like absolutely I would like if there was a bug or there was a feature I needed, I would reach out to the owner and see if um, they're open to a pull request or something. And 9 times out of 10 they are, as long as
Yeah.
you do a good job.
hmm And if it's something small and it looks like the package is not maintained, but you want a base for it, like honestly, you can just drop that code into your project, especially if it's a single application
Yeah.
project. And if you're doing client code, if it's a short-term project, that basically just becomes part of like the base code of the project with like a little attribution for where it originally came from.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And the interesting thing, like I miss the old days of Meteorite, where you could just pop in a Git URL and it would pull that package in for you. That was
Uh,
nice.
yeah, well, that when that went away, that screwed up so much stuff for us.
I agree. I agree.
Mm.
All right. Okay, here's another good one from Jan, another Meteor Club member here. Are there some cases where you would advise somebody not to use Meteor, but instead go for maybe classic older CMS platform or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Typically, what happens is a client will contact us and tell. It usually includes like a paragraph about what they want to do, and I usually respond to that with, nice to meet you. Thanks for contacting Useful IO. I'd be happy to chat with you about if Meteor and/or Useful IO is like a good match for you. And so that conversation is really about getting to know them and their business. And I'm looking for a good client, but I'm also looking for things that are good matches for Meteor, or they really want to use Meteor. So they could be like a simple website, um, and they could be using anything like, and it might be even like a better match for Rails. And sometimes I'll tell people that, but they're like they want to use Meteor because they have a perception that it'll be faster. And like you and I know, that really just depends on the development team about how fast the development speed is really going to go. Um, but if you're want like okay, so there's a good example is someone did contact me recently and wanted to build like a highly interactive blog for their like interior design company or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just told them, by the time we build all of the basic blog function, I mean, there are like, okay, so Sam, at Solvio made MD blog or Markdown blog and stuff like that. But by the time you build all that stuff that you would normally want into a blog that would come from WordPress, like you're going to spend 80% of it's going to be the same amount of time and probably less money for you to build your fancy experience on WordPress. So like, if there's a ready-made solution out there for you, I would say don't use Meteor. If it really is just a static website or like a non-highly interactive website, then I would say use Rails. So like, it can still be database driven and dynamic or whatever, but um, if it's not supposed to be more like an app, it's supposed to be more like a website, sure, use Rails. And then, Meteor is still new, so there are pieces of infrastructure that are missing that you have to build for every project. So you want someone that's fired up about using Meteor instead of trying to convince them to to use Meteor. So you explain like what the advantages are, what kind of sort of cool things that you can do with it, and if they're into it, roll with it. If they're not into it, you're probably going to save yourself a lot of pain by not taking the job from the beginning than
Yeah.
fighting with them later on down the line.
Yeah. So I think maybe my perspective on this is a problem. We've got another question here, like how do you tackle SEO with Meteor? And I think maybe the problem here is there's one good use case where I'd say like this is gonna be maybe a little more painful in Meteor than somewhere else. And so if you're gonna build custom software and like SEO is a concern, or I don't know. There's other little small corner cases around server-side rendering. Like, if that's going to be a problem for you, then I would say maybe don't look at Meteor right now. But the interesting thing is, like, I saw a demo the other day. Someone popped React into Meteor at our local Cincinnati Meteor meetup, and they've got server-side rendering out of the box, which is kind of interesting. And basically it's spitting out the HTML and then making like React is making the callback to the data sources, and like it starts reactively flowing the data through. So they're able to use fast render to get the data there on page load, and it renders the actual HTML output to the browser, which is exactly what you need for something like SEO purposes, or any of that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It's really, really interesting to me. Um, yeah, I definitely agree. Like if you're more likely better off just adding Discus to WordPress to get your side comment functionality or whatever the new UI blog hotness design is, rather than going out and building custom software. And that's always an interesting point. Like when I was at Gaslight. We had a partner there who always said like you don't want to build custom software, you don't want to work with us, like our entire sales process is convincing you don't want to do this, and if at the end of the day you still say you need this, then we'll build it for you, but chances are this is going to be a long process, and it might be a little painful because there's going to be like a mashing of kind of ideals and figuring out how to build the idea the way that it needs to be built, or as feasibly you're able to build it, and it's a tough process. So custom software is hard.
Custom software is totally hard. So you definitely, I mean, to your point, you want a client that's invested in using the technology and getting the benefits out of it, so that as you build each feature and you get feedback, it's okay that you're adding, like, and that's one of the nice things about tying in Pivotal Tracker too, or like some kind of project management process where clients are forced to prioritize, because as that feedback comes in, as you collaborate, then you're forced to prioritize. You understand like the decisions and the trade-offs that you're making. Like, it does always take longer than you think if you're trying to make a really excellent piece of software. And so like you don't want to go the custom route if 80 or 90% of what you want is already built, like at good quality for custom software. And then as far as SEO goes, like I'm sure server-side rendering is going to come sometime soon. Spiderable and Phantom.js does fine. Like it does for us, dude. Like we
So
are sitting,
I mean
we're sitting
it
where we
works.
want to be in terms of Google search results for some of the products. So like it happens.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a Google search for Crater. Uh,
we could get better with like our sitemaps, I think, but I think there's a package for that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't done any site mapping stuff. Um, yeah, I don't know. It seems okay now. Like it's picking up the tagline and stuff, and it's got content. Yeah, the biggest problem for me with Spiderable and Phantom.js is like you never really know when it dies. Like it doesn't really tell you that, hey, we actually just failed at doing the singular job we were supposed to do for you as a package. Um, you get something in the logs, but like, I mean, who's closely monitoring their logs to ensure that Google's getting what they want? So I don't know. Like for me, I switched hosting providers for Crater, and apparently Phantom wasn't set up right on the new one, and so for like a 4 month period there, like Google was just indexing a page that said loading, which was really bad. So
Yeah, I mean, you gotta check, and like I wouldn't say that we got it perfect, but um, Google indexes us fairly often, I would say, like every few days, and so if we make changes, like they get picked up relatively quickly.
mm, yeah, yeah. I would also say like if that's a concern for people, you should look at prerender.io. Have you looked at that at all?
No, what's pre-render? Is that the hosted?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Someone's built a Meteor package. I don't know how well it's maintained. I know it came out close to 1.0 coming out, so I would imagine it still works. But I think it does a similar thing to um, Spiderable in that it just detects the user agent and then it serves up cached versions from the pre-render database rather than like firing up Phantom. Like they handle the Phantom part for you and caching it in their database and that kind of thing. So
Nice,
yeah,
nice. Yeah, because the one thing that it's not is super fast, and like eventually that could affect your SEO. I mean, but this is again like sort of the icing on the cake, unless your business is a marketing business all based on SEO. But like really the speed, if you've got good content, like you're eventually going to make it up there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, a SaaS app is hard anyway. Like if you're building a SaaS app, the majority of that stuff's behind a login wall, right? So
Yeah,
you don't need SEO for a lot of that. And you can always split off the marketing site too. And
totally.
when they hit the login button, it goes to app dot my SaaS app.com or something like that.
There's a lot of sites that are or a lot of SaaS apps that we use that are exactly like that. And I think
Yeah.
if that's a really good suggestion. I'm glad you brought that up to do that if market or SEO is a big deal for you.
Yeah. Best tool for the job.
Mhm.
All right. I think this is close to one I asked earlier, but Ben Strahan asks, do your clients come with an existing Meteor app, or do you usually just start fresh with just an idea for the majority of your clients?
The majority of the clients come fresh, and so we're doing greenfield projects. But there have been a few times where we've taken over an application. Usually, that is a frustrated client, and so it's a it's interesting, and for one reason or another, the previous development team or single developer didn't work out for them.
Mhm.
And yeah, so we come in and we basically give an assessment of how we think things are and like how much time needs to be spent to like get stuff up to speed because we won't work on like we're actually working on an application in collaboration with Differential right now, but 99% of the time we're not doing that, and we won't like continue working on a project without bringing it up to basically our standards. And our standards evolve over time, of course, as like all of us have gotten more experience with Meteor. But in order for us to like actually move fast and give good value, we need to get things structured a certain way and to be able to actually provide good value to the client. But the answer to the question is most of them come with brand new projects, which is actually kind of cool because that's always fun. The flip side of that is that means most of the clients are startups versus big enterprise type clients or like huge venture-backed startups or like mid-tier venture-backed startups, and so those kind of clients come with different sorts of challenges.
Like paying you money.
Like paying you money, yeah.
Yeah.
So super budget conscious clients can be, if you don't have the buy-in for Meteor, super budget conscious clients can kind of kill your cash flow, and especially if you have other people on your team that need to get paid, that can be rough. And I've definitely gotten nailed with that more than once,
Yeah.
like especially last year.
Yeah. Actually, I was, it's funny. I was like just talking to my lawyer yesterday about this very problem. Like, I've got someone from 2 or 3 years ago that didn't pay me for some work I did for their startup, and we've been going back and forth about it. All these legal agreements and crap, and trying to get it paid and stupid. And then like all of a sudden, I had another client like a month, like 45 days ago. I did some work and they still haven't paid me, and like it's getting to that point where you're maybe not going to get a payment. And I reach out to my lawyer, and he's like, can I suggest that maybe you just start working on a retainer basis and you won't need me anymore? So,
So, have you changed your practices at all based on that?
yeah, I knew, yes, based on the original client, like I always require a deposit now to get going, and I always apply that deposit to the kind of like the last bill once we finish work. So they're kind of paying, and you tend to get a feel for it. I don't know, but it's definitely like I knew this person. They had taken my class, and they were putting together a team, and I was like, yeah, this sounds interesting, and I want to do a. They brought me in to do a lot of cucumber work, which I always love helping out with velocity and that kind of thing, and it
Mhm.
just didn't like. I don't know, like I didn't get the warm and fuzzies. I didn't ask for the deposit, right, because I knew the people, and then probably 3 4 weeks in, like I'm not hearing anything about when I'm going to get paid, and you start to wonder, and then like it gets worse and worse, and then you're like, I'm gonna take a pause for now, guys. I can't afford to not get paid.
It's the the worst thing as a contractor to have that, or as a consultant or a freelancer, or however big or small your shop is, to have that sort of uncertainty in your cash flow. Because like you want to be spending all your time, thinking about solving the problems, like writing the software, and none of the time dealing dealing with accounting and billing. But unfortunately, that really is the way it is. So that's cool. Yeah, like taking a deposit up front makes a lot of sense. I don't know how much you got shafted, but or are in the process of maybe not being shafted. Um,
We'll see in the next week
okay.
or so, I guess.
I got I got shafted for about $7,500, and it wasn't like a make or break, but it was definitely like I wish that hadn't happened, right? And what we if we make mistakes, like we write something that has bugs in it, like we do everything we can to fix it and all that kind of stuff, even after if you contact me like a month after, whatever, like we'll spend a day to fix whatever random thing it was that was our fault. um, we won't do like new feature development, all that kind of stuff, but we do our best to like make it right, and we want that business to succeed. But when a client seems like they're not going to pay, then we. So what happens for us, and this is something I had to just implement as a policy so that we wouldn't get these cash flows issues as bad anymore, is we don't continue working if there's two outstanding invoices. Like we just don't, as a rule, and we invoice every 2 weeks. And then if that happens, then anything after that requires like partial payment upfront to continue working for the next period of time, which would be like a month basically. Um, and it proves that the client is serious. One thing I always talk about with clients too before we start, since I think a lot of people in media are doing freelancing and stuff, is I always try to find out where the money is coming from. You know, is it coming from their own personal checkbook? Did they get funding? Did they get a grant? Um, did they, you know, are they spending thousands and thousands of dollars on like graphic designers and other project managers and all this kind of stuff too? So that I know, one, how much time we should dedicate to the project, like on a week, on a, like, you know, monthly basis, basically, so we don't break their bank. Um, but two, is this it's people get much crazier when, you know, they're financing things off their own personal credit cards. So like, you really don't want someone that's financing things off of their own personal credit cards. If you
Yeah.
want to, you know, unless you just want like a 1 month project and then you're going to go off and do something else. But if you want long-term projects, you need the money to be coming from somewhere that's a real business source of funding.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny. Like even the project I got stiffed on, when I originally put the time out on them, this is the one from a couple years ago. It was a Rails app, and they owed like I want to say like $12,000, and they've paid it down little by little over almost 3 years now. But still, like I even asked for a deposit from them, and they were a startup, and they were telling me, hey, we're about to close our round of funding, and I mean their deposit wasn't a small check; it was like $7,000. So I mean,
Mhm.
that's always a tough thing, to just gauge this kind of stuff. Like you're right, as a freelancer or a contractor, like this is the tough thing, right? And I don't know. I don't know. It's hard. So let's get back to meteor crap and stop crying in my coffee. About what are your thoughts? This is from Ben again. What are your thoughts on Famous, React, or some of the other kind of front end frameworks that are available? Meteoric. Have you guys used any of this kind of stuff? And what are your thoughts?
So I have experience with Meteoric, and Nick is super cool. Nick's the guy that's mainly behind it. Um, Meteoric is great if it's going to be a tablet or mobile app, or maybe you have a product and you're doing like, you have your web UI, and you have your Meteoric mobile UI, and maybe you have like a package or a common app that sits underneath either of those and just powers the functionality.
Yeah, because
Um,
I mean, Meteoric, for people that don't know, is a meteor wrapper around Ionic
mhm.
to work with Blaze, and the idea is that it gives you specific interfaces for each mobile platform, but there's no good way to do like a web UI in that, right?
No, it's not. It's not built for making a desktop application or like a web application. It's specifically built for web and mobile. But it gives you, so like my favorite CSS framework right now is materializecss.com. Um, but what you get with Meteoric is, one, like a basic infrastructure for building different sorts of mobile interactions, like different kinds of navigation style, so not just a side menu, but also tab bars and all that kind of stuff. And then you also get what you come to expect from a mobile application, which is like transitions between pages and all that kind of stuff come for free, which is really cool at the expense of doing desktop stuff. So whereas Materialize CSS does a pretty good job of being like Material Google, it's not going to have all those page transitions and stuff for you by default. Uh, the others were React and what was the other option?
Famous.
Famous. Okay, so Famous made in my opinion, Famous made like a really big um, hype. There was a huge buildup and then basically no delivery. Like I don't really see us using Famous for anything, and then as far as I can tell, because we will probably never be building like a real-time game at Useful.io. But if you were, then maybe that would be something that would be cool to build on. As far as React goes, it's pretty exciting, but I think what's going to end up happening is a lot of the benefits that people and the excitement that people have for different parts of React, someone's gonna take that stuff and build it back into Meteor, either as a package or eventually some of that stuff, is gonna end up into core, like the server-side rendering and all that kind of jazz. The one thing that is a little interesting is I've heard a few Meteor developers talk about they're worried that something like React is going to uh, that Meteor basically missed the window because React came into existence for Meteor to become like the Rails. And I think that is definitely not true because just like Angular, they're like completely different. It's solving a subset of the entire problem that you deal with in web development. And so the advantage of React is that you can use multiple kinds of backends, but the advantage with Meteor is that it's all taken care of for you. So
Yeah, I also think, the interesting thing watching the talk that Gerard gave at Meteor Cincy, React, number one, looks very interesting to me. It's definitely caught my interest. But the other interesting thing is, two out of the three solutions that he talked about for getting React into Meteor right now are actively being worked on by Meteor Development Group, and not, the third one, which is probably the most interesting, was like its own little router, is being worked on by a third-party person, but the official Meteor React package is being worked on by, I believe, Ben Newman. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's really interesting to me and signals that I think Meteor cares about this stuff, and even with Blaze 2 coming out, I think they're still trying to think about how to be a good citizen in this regard, and maybe how to include something like React. And I had a conversation with Matt DeBurgalis about this, and he pointed out something interesting. He said, early on in the JavaScript lifetime, everyone there was a while there where everyone thought MooTools was going to be kind of the de facto client-side library, and it turned out to be jQuery in the end. So I mean, it's still very, very early days for this front-end kind of framework thing, client-side library, I guess, whatever you want to call it. So
totally, totally. So I didn't actually know that. That's awesome. So I will basically be able to sit for like a month and maybe get the benefits of using using that stuff that they're building, which is great.
yeah,
Is one of the things I like about Meteor is they continue to solve the problems. I think the only thing that's going to kill Meteor at this point is if at some point if it gets, because they built a decent developer community around it, and most technologies that build a decent developer community around it that actually shares code sticks around in one way or another for a while. As far as I can tell from my little corner of the universe.
No, I would agree with you. It feels like this feels very similar to early days, in Rails land, where a lot of people were excited and a lot of people were doing very cool stuff. And that's not to say that isn't happening now, but it definitely feels like there's a point at which the community grows big and mature, and maybe there's some stagnation in like what's happening in Rails, or maybe they're going the wrong direction, right? Like we were all there for what did they call that? RJS, and then Turbo Links, and like all these really bad attempts at client side kind of interactivity solutions. So, and to be fair, like the technology wasn't quite where it needed to be either. So.
Yeah, a lot of stuff has changed in the capabilities of mobile devices and stuff like that to be able to run, and Cordova and PhoneGap and like all these things that are pushing like client-side applications forward. And that was from, it was originally from a different era, but like it had its own like competing project that was pretty epic called MERB, M-E-R-B, and then eventually that got merged into Rails. And I think that became like Rails 2 or something like that.
Rails
Right?
3, yeah, that
Rails
was
3. Okay.
that was painful. I can never forget that.
Yeah, so like I actually was our company was using MERB, and then that transition was really quite interesting. So, if Meteor the framework becomes super huge and bloated, then someone's going to come along and either fork it or write something that does like very similar like APIs, but a lot faster and cleaner, and people are going to love it. And maybe it integrates with Atmosphere and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't, and even if it does, it'll probably end up making Meteor better. But regardless, all of this is going basically in the right direction, I would say.
So speaking of like forking and doing something different, we'll take one last question here. It's from Joris again. He says, can you use Meteor without a backend, for example, to publish on GitHub pages? And I'm curious, I know that you can, and I'm curious if you've heard of Asteroid or looked at it at all.
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right. So I'll take this one. I would say definitely look at Asteroid. It's they build themselves as an alternative client for a Meteor backend. And the interesting thing is there's just some libraries that you include. Basically, they're using a DDP library on the front end, and they're using Q, which is the promises library, and then they have an asteroid.browser.js file as well. And you're basically able to just instantiate on the client side like an Asteroid connection back to a DDP URL, and then all of a sudden like real-time data can flow back and forth, and you can just build a regular kind of JavaScript fronted app. And my guess is this is the kind of thing that you could build what Joris is asking about, where you don't have to have the full kind of mini Mongo front end. You just have the DDP, and it's bringing the data over for you and doing the real-time updates.
That is pretty interesting. We wrote a Java DDP client at one point for a customer that wanted a front end in Java, and DDP is actually super easy. So if you have WebSockets and half a day you can implement a DDP client and get like the whole like real-time data. Implementing the backend part of Meteor is quite a bit different. So this is like you build an app that you don't have to deploy to. Okay, so actually,
you would deploy this. You would build a Meteor app on the back end and publish data, and then on the front end you could just use this DDP library and subscribe to data, and it would just like you could, for instance, where do they do this? So they've got something called Reactive Query, maybe. So they've got like they show you like if they set up a collection called tasks, they can insert one just using an insert call. They can set up a reactive query. I don't know what that does exactly. But you can see like they just console log the results, but you could just as easily do like a jQuery, change some HTML on the page basically, and it looks like that reactive query just reruns every time like something changes, it should fire.
So it's what's super awesome is that WebSockets don't have the same like cross-domain issues, and you can actually connect to multiple DDP servers from your Meteor client as well. But was George asking? Joris, okay. Was he asking, can you build like an application in Meteor and then just use the front end and put it somewhere?
He was looking specifically. He mentioned like publishing something to GitHub pages that's maybe reactively backed by Meteor, which I think Asteroid could do. And so maybe a good instance of this is if you look at Differential, their GitHub pages, like their main page. If you go to like github.differential.com, you can see there it says like they have this many public repos, this many members, this many commits. Like all that is being tallied in a Meteor app on the back end, and then they're just using jQuery to kind of like fetch this from a RESTful API. but it's already a Meteor app, so it would be much more interesting to maybe use just ddp.js and get these and fill them in the page rather than having to like do a bunch of jQuery wrappers and have this expose a RESTful interface and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think you can totally take the JavaScript and the CSS that Meteor bundles for you and drop it into a page, and as long as you're pointing the connection at a DDP server, like there, it will sort of work. Like before Meteor supported Cordova directly, this is basically how we were experimenting with making mobile apps using Cordova, was taking this pre-built like concatenated JavaScript and CSS files and putting them into the page, because that's all Meteor, and yeah, I mean that's really all Meteor is. So you could totally, I think, grab it, drop it into a GitHub page, and have it connect back to something.
Yeah, I guess that's a valid point.
Asteroid is sweet though. I'm going to look more into that. But that actually, I wanted to ask you a question sort of along these lines. Do you think that there are going to, or are there already, maybe you know better than I do, services that are specifically, besides, like Kadira, but besides Kadira, specifically tailored to plugging into Meteor applications and like providing some sort of functionality?
I haven't seen a ton of that. I've actually been working on one, but I've put it on pause for a while because I'm working on training material. But my idea was what I've started on is a bug tracking kind of application, which will track the client side and the server side bugs. Honestly, I put that one on the shelf when I heard Kadira was going to be adding that kind of functionality, and I've since heard that it's still not quite up to snuff for people. But I also have other thoughts of, I would really love to see a security conscious like application that's doing maybe code reviews for you and suggesting places you might be leaking data or exposing more than you mean to. I don't know. I think that would be hard to write. I've been trying to figure out like the best way that you could accomplish that. But I think that could be interesting as well. What other kinds of things are you looking for?
Okay, so it's not a big deal, but it would be, I think, way more awesome if eventually I wasn't doing JSON REST calls at all anymore. I was just basically doing an RPC on someone's remote server, and this would all obviously probably be wrapped in a package, but like, if, let's say I need to dump a bunch of stuff into like an Amazon service or something like that, I would much rather do that over a DDP connection to somebody, or like, oh, okay, so here's another one. Let's say like I want to send an SMS. If Twilio had a Meteor package or just like a DDP API that I could connect I could do ddp.connect to api.twilio.com and then twilio.call, Twilio's API basically, and get callbacks and all that kind of stuff. Like these are the things eventually I would rather do, and probably like these existing companies are not going to do that, but something along those lines. I would love to see more, even though you're going to definitely niche yourself down. I think the community is building enough stuff, and there's enough new Meteor projects going along that if you can solve one of these core problems, for people like even more along the DevOps side, logging to a third party that has a nice interface. Like Kadira is not the first app that came along that does performance monitoring, even for Node.js applications, right? But it does it pretty well for Meteor specifically by doing a few things. So like stuff like that I can drop into my application. I know it works, and I pay X amount per month, or the client pays X amount per month, and then we end up focusing more on what makes that application unique than figuring out how to like do push notifications for Apple or something like that.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I have thought about like push notifications. I'd love to see like a package that makes that a hell of a lot easier or something. Um,
There's probably
yeah, I don't
something in
know.
the Cordova plugins, but like I I get really excited when I think about all like the microservices that could be there for me to connect my Meteor applications to.
Yeah, I would agree. So, I mean, we had again, like when I was out there last month, I had a conversation with Matt and a few other folks at MDG, and the interesting thing to me is like why go DDP, right? And that's because you want like all that reactivity for free, perhaps, right?
Okay, so using the HTTP client library is pretty straightforward. Yeah, if it was something that I could use publish subscribe, I think that'd be pretty sexy. But just, the JSON REST stuff always gets abstracted in an NPM package into something that has more semantic value than call, like http.call this RESTful URL. It becomes like stripe.add credit card or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, my suggestion was like I don't know, like active resource didn't work very well for Rails, but it is still kind of interesting. Like, what if we could have, a RESTful HTTP backed kind of pub sub that's reactive and we can interact with, and it's pulling the data that we want. I think that could be very, very interesting. Then we don't care about these npm wrapper packages anymore. We can just quickly build our own kind of version, and I don't know, like I think enough of the components are there. You could build something interesting.
Components of building like your own RESTful API.
Yeah, building like active resource, right? Which is
Uh,
um, it looks like a database or it looks like a pub sub, but it's actually backed by RESTful calls that you're making to a service. Um, So rather than being Mongo backed, it's just RESTful backed. Does that make sense?
yeah. And I like that separation in the framework between I like the fact that you can actually fake publications and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
So like, if you wanted to provide real time, like a paid service to provide real time stock updates or something like that to DDP clients or like to Meteor things over DDP, I think that would be, I mean, anything that's real time could be a pretty good use case too. And that you're right. You're absolutely right. The data could be coming from anywhere. It doesn't need to be coming from an opt log tail or anything like that.
Right.
It would be, I think it would be nice for me personally to live in DDP land all of the time instead of drop into like Meteor wrapping async calls to RESTful third parties.
So I guess what you're saying is you'd love to see Firebase that outputs DDP.
Something I'd like to consume DDP services to do
Well,
things.
Firebase gives you the ability to like build up, like you can pull from different sources and then they like output the, I don't know if it's PubSub, but something similar to PubSub, like based on the code that's running for you. But yeah, I don't know. Like, you're not the first one to think about this or ask about this. There's actually, I don't know how much traction it got, but someone built a quick Meteor app that just lists out available public DDP connections that you can hook into. And I think the first one that they had put in there did have something to do with stocks. And so you can connect in and pull stock info out. But yeah, I definitely think like that could be very interesting. Like, definitely having things like weather data or even publicly consumable DDP data could be very, very interesting. All right, we went over our hour, but it's all good. I think it was a good conversation. So I just want to say thanks to you, Ian, for being on the show, and thanks to everyone that tuned in and watched live, and for everyone that will continue to watch remotely. I do this once a month. I'm thinking about bumping up to twice a month. If you want to help support this kind of stuff, you can go to patreon.com/Meteor Club, and we've got a couple plan levels there. And if you do the $10 level, you actually get access to the Slack room as well, and that's been pretty awesome. A lot of good chats go on there. Yeah, so
That's Patreon.com.
yeah, Patreon.com. I don't know. I may switch away from them at some point and just put this on my own meteor.js.club site. But
How do you spell Patreon?
Patreon, goodness, okay. It's patreon.com and then /Meteor Club. Will get you to the page.
Cool.
Yeah, I wish they had an API, but they don't, so they make me sad. I've asked them several times for it, and I think they're going to lose my business because they won't give me one. All right. Well, thanks for being on the show, man.
So, I guess, yeah, in closing, I will say, Josh, you're awesome. Thank you for having me on the show. I think this is really cool. I love the community. I hope we get the chance to work together sometime soon.
Yeah, definitely.
So if anybody has any like follow-up questions or anything like that, my email address is ian at, is it like a train going by?
Yeah, sorry. It's like it goes right by my backyard.
It's the musical ending. Okay, yeah. So my email address is ian, I-A-N, at useful.io. We are also variously hiring people, and we're going to be launching a training course in the next like month or so. So if that's interesting at all to you, either of those things, or if you have questions, shoot me an email. If you are interested in the training course, let me know, and you will get discounts for finding out about it super early. And
Nice. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I guess I do the training too. I've got a class Friday and Saturday this week.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. I'm actually working to move mine to be self-paced videos. So I've been recording all the training classes I do, and want to get them up online, hopefully within the next month or so, so people can just purchase that and watch it, and then there'll be like a Q&A area where they can ask questions and that kind of thing.
I know it's going to be super awesome because you know so much. So go buy Josh's course. Go buy it now.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you. Kid in the background.
Yeah.
Hi.